Hey everyone, I'm here with a bit of a special feature today. We think that there was a lot of information that could be gleaned from the World Team Championship recently. And in the light of comments that we made about Undead and the state of the tournament game at the moment, there's been some recent videos, obviously from us, but from other people as well, looking at how to maybe level the field a little bit. I think that the only way forward really is to have more data to sort of back up some of the assertions that are being made. And I think that while any tournament is going to have context or other sorts of noise that is going to need to be drilled down into, the data from the World Team Championships, I think, is actually pretty good. And given that it's available on New Recruit, it's worth going in and looking around for yourself. So I want to just thank Jeff, our sponsor at Pandemwargaming. If you want to look at the link below in the show notes, there's lots of terrain and other high quality plastic accessories for Warhammer you can buy, and also our financial supporters. But we're going to jump straight to New Recruit because typically I am a Best Coast pairings user for the first sort of year of Warhammer, and I think that that's not. I've decided to move away from them. I don't think for what you pay for, you really get as much as you think you should. I think it's quite expensive for software that really doesn't offer too much more than pen and paper. New Recruit has been around for a while and I think is getting better. So when I got into Warhammer, I used Old World Builder exclusively. I think I was probably one of the bigger fans of Old World Builder out there. But when we decided to we decided to no longer contribute to a Best Coast Pairings subscription, I went back to New Recruit and was really impressed that not only is the list building, which is a little bit more detailed, but it checks for things as you go to make sure that it's already compliant with the rules of list building for Warhammer and probably other games too. But on top of that, the tournament pairing system, which is free, is pretty good in terms of generating some data. So if you're looking for this event, it was called the WTC Clash of Nations. So you're going to need to have a free account to be able to see the information I've got. You can see the results, but to see these statistics, you need to have created an account. After I ran through these statistics the first time, I thought, well, I'm about to pay for an account to support New Recruit. We'll see how we go. But if you come in, you can go to this event and it has the usual things like the details, who played, what the pairings were, overall the team rankings. Congratulations to England again. I think from watching some of the follow-up videos, it was something that means a lot to the players. And I know Richie was on Oh Well Behemoths, an Australian podcast recently. I think there is probably a level of relief, but to win one and being from the Commonwealth or Anglosphere, we know how tortured the English are, especially in European competitions. So congratulations to them. You could also look up individual rankings, which is where some of this data becomes interesting too. It can come back to this at the end, but I want to sort of contextualize this by going into stats. So if you go into stats, I think the best statistics to look at is to look at how armies fared when played into, which is the parlance. So if you were having to take your army into a different archetype, how would it go? So it's important to note in teams, these are 8-person teams, and there's a somewhat convoluted process to work out pairings. But at the same, and I'll sort of explain a little bit here how that affects these pairings. So if I look at Beastman Brayherd's Wild Herd, I can come down and look at here that when the Tomb King's Royal Host army, of which there was only one, and we'll look at that, which congratulations to the English, because that was one of their finesse points that they did differently to other teams that people might want to look into, given its success earlier online. Their awareness of the archetype it gave them an advantage, it seems. But you can see they scored 18 points out of 20 and won 18-2. However, even with the 100% win rate, there's only 4% of matchups that were played this way. So the way you can look at that was this just a one-off matchup? I would love to hear from different team captains, if you're watching this, about what strategies they used to get specific matchups, because I think for the average player who's at home trying to work out if that army that they can play on the weekends got a chance at all, you need to look here at what the matchups were when there was a greater number of them occurring. So here you had Wolves of the Sea, also 4%, but once you get to 13%, you have Mortuary Cult scoring averaging 10.7 points. Now that's not that bad. Like 10.7 means that really Beastman is averaging 9.3, or Wild Herd, I should be cautious to say, back. And this was 13% of matchups. So Mortuary Cult, which is one of the better armies in going around, had 2 draws and a win, but that's not a bad result. So if you're someone who's Beastman, you might be thinking about Wild Herd, and why that gains a little bit more significance is that this 13% number starts to be a bit more meaningful. So when you come down later, you've got just average Beastmen, also 13%, and they're averaging 9.3 points against Wild Herds. What this tends to say is people chose to play at 13%. This is a matchup that was sort of wanted by team captains to some extent. And then 21% Grand Cathay. Grand Cathay is against Beastman Bray Herds, only scoring 7.6 points. So very interesting there that you've got not a great result. Wild Herd, is it something we need to look at? We'll come back to that in a second, but I think this is how you want to look at it. Orcs and Goblin Tribes, 13%. So if armies were when they played against Beastman Bray Herds, this is what they got. Orcs and Goblins only scored 3.3 against Wild Herd, even though there were 13% of matchups there too. So Orcs and Goblins, as Paddy has made a video about, and you see, are one of the better armies against Cathay. Really, that comes down to the Doom Divers are one of the best war machines around, and practically, if you're trying to knock off a Sky Lantern, you're going to need war machines. And underneath that, Fanatics at the tournament level tend to be maxed out, and they're also pretty good against Sky Lanterns because they can hit them. They're not going to get away. And either Doom Divers and Fanatics are also not bad against the cannon. But this is how you read these statistics. So if you create an account, you can come in and you can find that this is how the matchups were. So we're going to run through a couple of the popular lists. Chaos Dwarves were played here, but it was only, I think, one player. Expeditionary Force was another populous army. So here, and this is where it becomes fascinating, so 19% Grand Cathay played into Dwarven Mountain Holds Expeditionary Force, but averaged 16.7 points against it and won 10 times. Now, this is very interesting because if you've seen some of the videos, particularly Richie, who you know is an exclusively Dwarfs player, what you see is that people were trying to score. Teams may have considered the Grand Cathay matchup something that they were going to lose 20-0. And could the 3.3 that the X-Force lists are getting here, is that what they think is the most you could get against Grand Cathay? So I want you to think about that very carefully. If you think, we've made a video about this already after the London GT, but if you think Grand Cathay is beatable, maybe it's beatable, but this is expert players around the world. I think it's pretty rough. So looking here, they've chosen X-Force to play against a lot. If you're playing just in your garden variety tournament, you're going to get smashed. But in a teams tournament, losing 16-4 or 15-5 might be a great result. And it'll be interesting to see team captains talk about this a bit more, about whether this was a matchup they wanted, X-Force, or were they caught out and did they think they could win better? And unfortunately, a Cathay is really that good. So going down the list, you're seeing more against X-Force, Bretonia getting in there a bit, scoring well, Vampire Counts scoring well. And really, like for matchups were pretty common, the X-Force player has not done that well at all. So you can see down here, these potentially dragon builds, it's doing better against. Even Bretonia doing better against. But against the other Kingdom of Bretonia, of which 11% of matchups were, they're not doing that well either. So You've got to have a look here. This sort of data is very interesting. So when you're playing against these armies playing against it, this is how well they do. Let's go to another popular... Okay, let's go to Cathay. Cathay gets played a lot. What did best against Cathay? So Wild Herd, 2 wins, a loss, 2 draws, only 6%, but standing at averaging 12.4 points. Interesting. Then you've got Orcs and Goblins, 3%. Cathay mirror matches, not a lot you can probably glean from that. 3 wins, 3 losses. Vampire Counts, 20%. So this is a matchup that people want. And the Vampire Counts player lost 9 games, but they were close, like 8.4 points. So fascinatingly there, having recently written, or published a lot of screed about where I think Vampire Counts in the meta, I want to play Grand Cathay. I felt like their lack of magical attacks would be not very good against me. This is where you might want to drill more into the matchups and see. This tournament was played before the publication of multiple Rings of Jet. So that spamming unquiet spirits, I feel like could be rough for Ethereal, but here you go, like Vampire Counts maybe not doing as well as I would imagine. As you go down, look, where you're not getting a positive score against Cathay very often. What are the sorts of matchups people wanted? It looks like Vampires, X-Force, which we talked about a second ago, but really it looks like people have just thrown things to the wolves here. There's not a lot more. So people have tried to play Vampires. You'd think they would want to get more Cult in there, but it really wasn't significant, the amount of matchups. So something to think about, that Cathay was pretty much just something that tournament players, some of the best players in the world, chose to ignore. Okay, then let's look at Exiles, which is pretty common out there. I don't think it had a huge showing at the World Team Championship, but typically people had it in their S tier. I agree. You'll see Ed at Close Order put a video out recently where his supporter base still had them at the S tier, and I think he tried to argue them out of it. I think he's right, even though he's playing it a bit at the moment. I think you'll see this is why. So people love to put Nuln into this. As you hear that, so only 4%, 19-0. Cathay, only 4%, 19 in the win. So these gun lines, pretty good against it. You've got even more Cult, which you'd think is something that maybe Britannia has a chance against 12% of the time. It's scoring 10.3 points, but it did lose to Orcs and Goblin tribes. Here you go, 20% of people trying to play into that, getting those 10 points, but generally draws here. Sorry, I should say the Mort Cult was a win and 2 draws. The army that it should be good against is Vampire Counts, yes, and you see people trying to get that matchup where Vampire Counts are only averaging 6.3 points, but they've got their wins. So that's probably the place right now, unless you're playing against a lot of vampires, which is pretty fair as one of the better armies out there. Exiles, I would imagine, is going to start to fall out of the metagame. So why don't we have a look then at, are we up to vampires? Because I think we might bounce around a little bit, but if we come down to Vampire Counts, who I've given big raps, how does the field go against Vampire Counts? Well, you see, there it is, Kingdom of Britannia, which is unusual because it tends to be the veteran, but maybe there were banners of Lady's Grace running around in there, and Exiles are at the top, but people have tended to dodge those matchups. Where they couldn't dodge it was Cathay. So going back to where we looked at the Cathay side of things, this is fascinating that Cathay held up and did better, over 24% of matchups, 9 wins, 4 losses, 4 draws, but overall averaging more points in the split. Tomb Kings against Vampires, a matchup that you would think is not great for more Cult, and they've held their own there, 4 wins, 4 losses. As you go down, people seem to be willing to put Warriors of Chaos or X-Force up against Vampires, but they haven't been able to sort of pull it out very well. So let's have a look at more Cult. That tends to be rounding out what people think are the best armies. And you can see there, its best score against more Cult. You've got Grand Cathay coming in doing better than expected, 3 wins and a loss. Wolves of the Sea. So this is your archetype that has dragons, but everything else pretty much is a skirmisher, but attacking skirmishers. Only 2% played, but seems to have done well. If we look at where the percentages are, we're starting to pick up with orcs and goblins into more cult. They're averaging more points against them, even though they've got 2 wins, 3 losses. And then you're going to vampire counts, which we've talked about before. Overall, you're looking at starting to pick up Warriors of Chaos, Beastmen. So maybe there's like armies that are aggressive in combat are a good bet there. So if you maybe we'll look lastly at that Warriors of Chaos build, because that tended to be the dragon build that did the best. The high elf versions seem to have faded out of relevance. I guess otherwise the double dragons is like the old Tomb Kings, like Phil Carl's version, which almost he plays exclusively. So 27% Grand Cathay playing into Wolves, the dragons, but not really smashing them. So 2 wins, loss and a draw, 11.3 points. You've got Kingdom of Bretonia, Dwarven Mountain Holds, Empire of Man, Orcs and Goblins. Those are like you're looking at a lot of war machines, really. Not from Errantry Crusade, but 7%, interestingly, they had a very good spread of armies playing against Warriors of Chaos. So that's sort of what you see on the list. Now that doesn't, you don't know if you're seeing people who are weak or strong at skills, and that's where you can have a look at some of the other stuff. So if we go to the stats, I haven't really found a lot of good data coming out of these options in stats, but if you come back to individual rankings, this can be fascinating as well, because you can rank by strength of opponent. So this is as players went forward, how did they go? And, we're expecting, if we leave Cathay for the moment, sorry, Chris, Tom, etc., but we can look at the armies that might have done well. So here's an Orc and Goblin list. And given how well other players have played, it'll give you that list. So we'll do individual rankings. I wonder if it shouldn't close me out and I can see these lists. Typically, we can go back to teams, but you can play around with a lot of these settings because it's really just a spreadsheet. Here you go. When we take away the strength of schedule, you can come in and look at his list here. So Sam's got the massive amount. He's got the double Doomdiver, double Mangler, 90 Fanatics, a lot of Trollhide Trousers, 4 Trollhide Trousers. So there you go. If you're looking to play something like that extreme, but it's not Cathay and it's not Undead. And you can have a look at some other results. So these are the big hitters for their teams. Scoring, you could score a maximum of 100 points over the day. Let's have a look at Chris's. You could have a look at his Cathay list for pointers. He has 3 cannons. He has 2 lanterns, and the lanterns are protected with saves. He's got a level 3 and a level 1. You could go further. So if you come down, vampires, Charlie is making a name for himself. He's done very well. I think he's made some clever adjustments here where he has the dark magic. It must be a battle lust word of pain guy on the grave guard that sort of turns these guys into like they're already good, but giving them +1 attack, frenzy, and then hatred as well. And with all the other things that infantry get, that is just an axe grinding, a meat grinding machine. So for Charlie to give up Scepter de Noiro there is a big deal. This was a piece of tech if people are playing vampires. I imagine it's for Glittering Robe in the unit. No Scepter, but an extra Necromancer for that. Only 1 unit of zombies. And you can come down and keep going down the list. Now, I'm just picking up people who I know have different sorts of lists. Here was a Wild Herd list that did well. Andreas. So Andreas has got that Black Maw character. I think the Old World Legends have talked about a little bit. I'm really interested in these not just level 1s, but level 2s. I guess with Lore Familiar, that makes sense. To get, say, Steed of Shadows and Demonic Vessel, or demonic, whichever one it is. It gives the attack, strength, AP bonus. 47 gore. Scourge of the Burden is very clever, so you can use reserve move. Instead, you can use open order. If you've seen the video on how the I've shown you how to use reserve move and lumbering. Similar concept here. A lot of mobility. If we thought Razor Gores were dead, they're still here. And going further in, you can see different people and different results if you're trying to find lists. And you might see people who, we see it in Sydney all the time, people who are taking lists from Warhol tournaments or these types of events. If you're looking to play something, you might want to start here and you think, okay, well, I haven't seen the Rune of Concussive Force played before. Giving a unit stupidity can be incredible in matchups. So you could be looking down at those players and see who did best. You can say, well, Chris was on top. However, after playing, was Sam, did he have the harder run? You can look at who played particular types of armies. So did everybody who had wild herds in their team makeup? Not many people at all. One came 5th, or like in terms of individual rankings, and someone else was 22nd. You could look at these lists. And yeah, you can go right into this sort of thing. And I think it's then going back to maybe looking here at the teams. You can say, well, England have done well. Denmark have done well. There's been a run of teams. Generally, Belgium, Italy, Germany have great reputations. I don't know a lot about the Polish, French, Finns, or the Dutch, but you might want to go further into their lists. And you could say, for example, well, what did England do differently to other teams? So one of the things is they played Royal Host, not Mortuary Cult. So you might want to go into Scott's list and have a look. And same thing, you see 3 Mortuary Priests level 1 for Glittering Robe. And then you've got your 74 infantry, like 2 74 infantry cohorts. So that list, which we all thought sort of broke Warhol earlier in the year, still around, and the English were aware of it. You might look at what else they did. I'd really recommend Ed's interview of Richie and Tom, where they talk briefly about their pairings process. I hope they go into more detail. But for example, James Ramsey playing Crasium Warhost, and you might want to get that idea of what is in some of these Wolves of the Sea lists, which are really the vehicle they're using to run the Double Dragon Double Spawn, or some people are running Triple Dragon. But you can see there the rest is pretty much backed up by skirmishes. So yeah, hopefully that's a little bit of a tour of Warhol. Like for me, the takeaways that are coming out from the World Team Championships are that, look, it's probably is Cathay. Cathay and the Lanterns and the Cannons have leveled all of the other armies so that now the Undead are even better, and that's with Match Play Guide as well. So I think from there, you're seeing this at the top. 3 armies, Vampire Counts, Mortuary Cult, and Grand Cathay are pretty much, if you're going to go to an event that's an individual event, they've got the best chance against the field. But underneath, you can see from that World Team Championships that Wild Herd is an interesting answer. Nuln is pretty good if you're in a field with a lot of Bretonia still. X-Force are people playing X-Force because they get a chance to shoot off, go first, and have a crack at all of the Cathay Lanterns and Cannons. And then, are you playing Wolves of the Sea? Is that got a good shot at if you want a very aggressive army out there? So have a look, get into New Recruit. I think it's a great program. I'm fully converted. From here on out, you'll see as we bring up information on our next tournament that I'm going to be using New Recruit exclusively. I will be in touch with the creators. I hope we can sort of look at some of the additional features there as well. But yeah, I think worth having a look. And if you are a serious Warhammer player or you just want to be prepared for your next event, check out some of those major tournaments that you can find on New Recruit, because there are some interesting statistical details that you can break down. Thanks again for watching, guys. We'll see you soon.